In the world of small business, we're often told that numbers are the only language that matters, but my guest today is proving that the ultimate competitive advantage isn't found on a spreadsheet, it's found in the care factor. Kevin Clegg is the CEO of Clegg Auto, and he's the architect behind A More Company. After a sophisticated corporate detour, leading HR for global giants like Honeywell and USAA, Kevin returned to his family's auto shops in Utah with an incredible, non-negotiable condition. He would only lead the business if he could eventually give it away to the employees. In 2022, he established the first employee ownership trust holding company in the US, effectively decommodifying the business to protect its mission forever. Today, we're exploring why helping an employee own their life is a prerequisite for them owning a company, how a 200% accountability model replaces traditional management, and what happens to a business when the care factor becomes the primary metric of success. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
It's great to have you. I really admire your leadership. I'm so glad that our friend Miran Oka has put us in touch together, and it's been great getting to know you. And I can't wait for our chief stewards to hear a little bit about your journey. So thank you for carving out the time.
No, thank you. Excited to be here.
All right. So if we look back to your upbringing, Kevin, or maybe just your earliest professional years, I'd love to start with some of the earliest contexts. Is there a foundational memory that shaped your view on what it means to be responsible and have the stewardship over others?
Yeah, I think it started actually just as a kid growing up. My parents were all about hard work and making sure that we had responsibilities and that we all were participating in the home. And we had like 5 acres of land, and my dad saw fit that we put it to good use and be good stewards of the land. And that meant when my friends were coming over and saying, "Can you play?" I said, "Yeah, as soon as we finish a couple rows of corn, we got to hoe those things and get the weeds out, and then I can go play." And so I just, from an early age, always working, always having a job to do, always being responsible, accountable for something. And as you learn that for yourself, then I think the first step of good stewardship is be a good steward of yourself, right? To understand how you care for yourself, and then you can be in a position to do more for others.
Mm. Well, it's interesting because you did have this big corporate HR track before you came back to the family business. I'm curious how maybe some of those early lessons that you had on the farm, how did that inform maybe the traditional capital labor relationships in that big corporate environment? How did that feel maybe either misaligned when you eventually entered into that world compared to maybe some of the farm days?
Yeah, I think you have a different mindset coming in. Like you're focused on what you can control and what you can do, and there are frustrations when you see that um, uh, as you're striving to create something that's mutually beneficial for everybody, and you see somebody making a decision in a senior level that's not. And you can't control or influence that as much as you'd want to. It's frustrating. So that would have been probably the biggest disconnect for me coming into the corporate world, is the amount of influence a single person can have for good or for bad. And when it's not good, it's frustrating. It's hard to, you look at it and you can see how easy it is for people to become disengaged. And when you're disengaged, then the sum of all of the parts are not giving you what you could potentially get, and that's frustrating.
Yeah, I heard. I never have asked anyone to name names or any of that, but are there any specific examples of that you, or stories that you recall experiencing of feeling that disconnect or that tension?
Yeah, I yeah. You come into a situation where there's a brand new leader of an organization, and you're maybe on the right track, meaning decisions have been made that would involve more input from more people. People are being heard. Somebody comes in and suddenly says, "That's not the direction we're going. We've got to get profits to a better place," and suddenly you're cutting the workforce, right? There's mandatory layoffs, and you're trying to figure out how to cut people, and yet a quarter later, after you've cut people, there's this mad dash to go to outside recruiting firms to restaff up because now there's a deadline that has to be hit, and you're looking at yourself in the mirror going like, we just went through this whirlwind exercise of trying to determine how to remove dollars from a P&L impacting people's lives, only right to turn around and rehire them through contract labor, or different people, and you're just the chaos of the puts and takes, like, is it's frustrating. It's like, where's the long-term thinking? What, how are we ensuring we're doing what's right by the people, by the customer? Why are we chasing quarterly numbers? So
Yeah, amen. I worked in the staffing world for many years, or we would provide that outside service of placement of contract or full-time placement. And I went into it with kind of a noble idea that we're impacting human lives, and the success of the hiring managers is predicated on the way they build and support and nurture their teams, and of course helping people through their transitions. But there were many times where I felt like, we're dealing with human lives here, and we're just trying to put butts in seats, and that really did not sit well with me, and it didn't, I couldn't reconcile that with my initial feeling of what it meant to help people through the things where they feel like their agency at their fullest, which is in their vocational lives. And that kind of, I became a little bit more disenchanted with it. I still love to help people find talent and to find opportunities, but really to take grasp of it in their own lives, and try to reverse engineer the outcome that they most want to see. So I always struggled with that as well, from the outside in, and building teams. I'm curious for you too. That's kind of one of those hard lessons learned for me, but I feel like every long tenured experience has a profound shift in perspective. So as you've been leading your family business for this long, and you've started this a more company, what was some defining realizations that maybe brought the full weight and beauty of a shared stewardship into focus?
I think you kind of mentioned in the intro that, like, I agreed to come back to the family business only if we'd found an opportunity to transition it to employees. And I think that on the journey of, like, look, we're doing this together. The fact that we're doing it together, transition should be mutually beneficial, so that it can't be just we take care of the founders only, right? In some kind of an exit was on my mind, but nothing more than that. Maybe the most profound shift was in 2020, when just kind of looking at life in general and business in general, and went, you know what, like, an exit shouldn't be what defines how we do this thing. Like, an operating model of each person engaged in the business, each person feeling like, I've got a stake in this thing and my opinion matters, and I've hitched my wagon to a place I really care about, and I want to see that it's successful now and for the long haul. Like, how could you create a steward environment as an operating model and not just as an exit strategy? And what would that look like? What would happen? What would, like, I've always been fascinated by just the idea of org structure and design, and what you create and what outcome you get because of what you created. And so what would happen if we did this as an operating model? What would people engage? Would this turn into something better than what we were operating without that in mind?
What was the first thing that you did as you started to think about that? Like, where did you even start to explore an EOT and what it meant and how to
Yeah.
apply it as an org structure and all
The
that?
first thing I did was really not very smart. So the first thing I did is I told all the employees, "Hey, like, we've talked about this, and we think an employee ownership model is a great model. So we're going to become employee owned, and it's probably going to take, maybe 2 or 3 months, and this will be great." And then it took us 2 years to figure out what we were going to actually put in place. So we first went down the path of considering a employee stock ownership plan and ESOP, and for a number of reasons felt like it wasn't quite the right fit. It didn't provide long-term kind of guaranteed purpose protection, and then we pursued kind of a business employee cooperative, and then kind of landed on EOT as the direction that was going to really protect our purposes for the long haul, and create something that was more evergreen, that you could see kind of the spirit of stewardship be something that lasted in perpetuity.
Mm. Well, Carrie, so you shared kind of this excitement with everybody, and you got everyone kind of believing that this is the path that you were on, and maybe in some way that created an accountability that you now have to do what you said. You have to figure something out. Was there grace given? Was there any frustration over the 2 years of developing that? Like, what would you tell a chief steward that's considering an EOT, like maybe the steps that they should take,
Yeah,
in doing
like
that?
I mean, I think the naivety of being doing something that challenging that very few had done before,
Right.
and in a short time frame was like, don't do that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
start there. Like it takes some time to do something thoughtful and meaningful, and discuss and exploring the options. Because I'm not going to be the person that says that this one's the right way and the others are wrong ways, right? But it takes some time to explore the options, to consider like the pluses and minuses of a employee stock ownership plan, or putting in place profit sharing. But ultimately, like what I love about any of these models is you're looking at succession and transition, and you're trying to figure out how to make sure that that's a powerful thing, and not a detriment or a detractor or a potential elimination of business because of an inability to do it right. So take your time, think it through, do involve the workforce, recognize it's going to take some time to get through a process, and find others who have done it before, and learn from them.
That's great. And then for those chief stewards that have partners or other key shareholders that they need to kind of convince that this is the path forward, what did the discussion look like with your family? And,
Yeah,
how would you recommend approaching that with your shareholders?
yeah. When I first brought it up, my brother was the primary shareholder, and between the two of us, we held the majority of shares. And so, first discussion was with him, just to say, what are your thoughts on this idea of what if we exited now? Like, what if we create some sort of transition now, and it wasn't a giveaway scenario. It was like we figure out what fair market value is. We determine what we'd want to sell it for, recognizing that what we determine to sell it for is a factor of how much do we believe that we've done this on our own and we took the risks and no one else did, and or is there some element that as we construct this thing that we should take care of the people that have been on the journey with us, and what would that look like? Is that a lower valuation? Is that a payout over time? Is that like, what does that mean? So that there's a reward and recognition for everybody associated. So we just had those open conversations that said, it feels like if we're being honest, we need to be inclusive of everybody and not just ourselves. And that same conversation with the other owners in the business was the model that we followed, that just said, what could this look like? Here's some scenarios. And when we kind of came up with the EOT as the best option, we ran through scenarios until everybody was like, yeah, I could live with that. I can, whether you stay in the business or whether and keep working as an employee owner, or you want to exit, like this could work. So that's the process that we went through.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's often found in the questions, right? And just the wrestling with that, and the consensus building with all
Yeah.
of it. So,
Yeah.
really good advice. And I'm going to try to capture all those questions that you asked into a document as we consider that in the future. I've often found that I've advised other entrepreneurs on when to consider like a partner if you founded the business and bring them on. And a lot of it is just diving deep into all the different questions and making sure that all parties have a chance to weigh in on that. And then you feel a little bit more confidence in the decision. Stewardship, I feel like is relatively easy in times of growth, but it's really just tested in the valleys. What are some of the hard won lessons that emerge for you when your core values have maybe collided with some of the difficult business realities that you faced over the years?
Yeah. I mean, even like, so we transitioned in 2022. We're 3.5, almost 4 years into this. It's been wildly successful on the measures that matter, whether it's cash flow, customer sat, employee sat. Those things are all super positive. It's never been better in the history of our company. At the same time, it's not easy. It's hard. We recently had our first kind of post transition to this structure acquisition that came about because we had an employee that came to us and said, "Hey, what matters most to me in life is being close to family and being able to support them. I've got to move back home." And we ended up acquiring a business in Augusta, Georgia, that was a place that he found that was for sale that seemed like it would fit for us, and being able to perpetuate employee ownership and allow him a chance to kind of share and teach what he'd learned from with us with a new group of employees. And we went through the process and pulled the trigger and acquired that business. And then every possible thing that could go wrong goes wrong, because business is hard, right? Just because you have a good model, there's things that can still go wrong. He wasn't received well by his family in the area, and his personal family really struggled to feel like that was home. And even though they thought they were doing the right thing, it didn't turn out. And he ended up moving back to Utah and is in a much better place now. But like literally every possible thing that could go wrong led us to a place where we couldn't sustain the business. Like it didn't make sense. It was going to cost us cash flow on all of our other businesses indefinitely. And we had to make the really hard decision to meet with the employees there and say, "Hey, look, another direction is going to have to take place here. Let us help you find jobs, and and we'll find someone to commit to take care of obligations with warranties and so forth with work we've done with customers." And man, that was the hardest thing I've done in my career, to meet with people and you think you've got something that's just going to work, and it doesn't just always work. It's hard. So there's the real realities of business being difficult and challenging, and things can happen outside of your control that you just have to deal with and make hard decisions.
Yeah, and that's part of the stewardship responsibility as well, because the impact, the ripple effect it would have had on the rest of your employees and the people whose care you're entrusted with, would have had a negative effect. So sorry you had to go through that, but it's yeah, like you said, it's one of those realities. I'm interested too, maybe for our chief stewards, to talk about your 200% accountability model. So let's just start with like what that is for you. I'd like to bring that to bear as a
Yeah.
discussion point too.
Yeah, I'll take it to like two pieces of it, how we got to the 200% thing, in context of we went through all this work for a couple of years trying to decide what model of employee ownership we wanted to go with, and we picked the trust model. And we thought the hard work was getting to that finish line, and we did it. We're now employee owned, but the hard work started, like the real hard work started after we did that, when employees are looking at you and saying, "But what do you actually expect now?" Like, you're not asking for us to contribute financial capital, but you're calling us employee owners. Like, what does that mean? What does it mean to be an owner? And taking them through a process of, you know what, like that's a good question. Like, let's define what ownership is. And we first started with asking them to own their lives. And they're like, "What does that mean?" And we said, "Let's make it really simple. Let's help everybody go through a process of thinking about, what is it that I care about most in my life, and do I know what that is? And as soon as I know what that is, am I choosing to put my energy to that, or am I just living life, and wherever it takes me, I go, and I have no control over it?" And that process was really eye-opening for everybody, to say, "Wow, there are things I care about more than others, and no, I'm not putting the attention energy on it that I could." And so we just asked them, commit, like at this point going forward, always do something that shows that you're intentionally putting energy on that, on something that you care about more than another, or something that needs attention. And if you're doing that, you're owning your life. And then in that, in the spirit of that, you've ignited a care factor. Like suddenly you understand what you're living for, right? And now apply that to your job. Like if you're going to own your career, it's not your manager's job or anyone else's job to tell you what you do for your career. It's now make a choice that this career path that you're on aligns to the things that matter most to you and what you're doing for work. And as you look to the future, the things that this job and track is going to provide for you is what you want. And if it is, great. And if it's not, how can we help you, right? To make a change, whether it's to leave or to change jobs and stay in the company or whatever that entails. But like, if you can't have a care factor for the career track you're on, it's not likely it's going to align to the things that matter most in your life either. And it's not likely that you're going to enjoy life like that. It's going to be rough. So let's get those things aligned, and then you can be an owner in a company. And that means that you're committed to the culture, you're committed to understanding how you impact cash flow, how you impact the customer, and to improve in your job. Those are the things you do as an owner, and pick something. Again, put some energy to one of those things that needs the most amount of attention that would impact the company the most. And everybody do that all the time. And now we're committed as owners, right? And that leads to then the 200%. So we look at that and say 100% commitment is that you've bought into all of that. You're sold on that. You're doing that. You're committed to owning your life, your career, and your company. That 200% comes in that now you're committing to also help others be accountable to that. That you're not just going to be there, head down, doing your own thing, but you're actually going to be aware that of others trying to do the same thing you're trying to do. You're going to be curious enough that you're going to question if they're not, and you're going to say, "Hey, what's going on? I noticed this. Is there anything I can do to help you?" And let's create this culture of 200% accountability that says let's be stewards of each other and not just not caring when we see people maybe not performing the way we thought that the expectation said they would.
Yeah. I don't know why it popped into my head as you were talking about that, but it kind of reminds me of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, of like kind of getting your own kind of self profile figured out and your own basic needs, but then the transcendence that it requires to think of others, and then be outward focused. And I imagine that's where the magic happens, is when, everybody is bought in and then they're looking after one another and they're kind of transcending the self desires and really looking after the benefit of the whole. And I'm curious with that too, like, what was your process? Where did you, like, you had it sounds like kind of like a listening tour, and you sat down and you were able to document and hear out like all the personal goals that everyone had. What were some of the steps that you took, and
Yeah.
how long did it take, and how would you
Yeah.
advise other chief stewards to kind of follow that model?
Yeah. And when I looked at like, um, what does ownership mean, and kind of the realization that it should start with self first, right? So some form of like owning your own life. I'm like, who's done this before? Like, inherently, I'm the guy that says I don't want to create something from scratch. Somebody's got life lessons. So who's done this in blue collar, right? Because if you show up to a blue collar employee and say, "What's your purpose?" Right? They're
Yeah.
gonna look at you like, just go back to your office and let me turn a wrench, please, right? So I just went out to kind of LinkedIn community and said, has anybody ever created or designed something that helped blue collar workforce to think about things like what matters most or what is my purpose, but done in a way that's actually engaging, meets them where they're at, and isn't too frou-frou, right? And a guy, Jake Herway, had spent a chunk of time working with Gallup and kind of dedicated his life to this idea of helping people figure out what matters most. And so he agreed just pro bono to say, like, this is a cool project. Can I help you? And so he and I started meeting together and talking about this. And
Did you
then
know him before that, or was that the?
not at all. And
Wow.
then
Okay.
there was an instructional designer, Trion Mueller, that had spent a lot of time with large, big companies, and he agreed. He also was intrigued about the project. So the three of us just started meeting, and we would throw around ideas and concepts, and with always kind of that. This has to be it has to be simple, has to be short segments. It can't be, you don't get trained and anointed. It has to there has to be a recurring nature to anything we do, like just kind of some core principles. And they just started kicking it around until we came up with a program that we then tried out with, kind of picked the toughest, most like, I don't do the sensitive, warm, fuzzy little like stuff, like. And so we tried it out with them, and when we finished, they said, "Look, I'm not sharing any of the answers. You designed this for us to talk about our answers. I'm not sharing my answers with you, but honestly, I've never done something like this before. It was valuable, and I think everybody in the company should do it." And with that, we rolled that out to everybody. And then once we finished that one, just continued to then look at designing same thing for career, same thing for company, just kind of think following a similar model, right? Invite people to explore ideas, help them to figure out how to, from those ideas, prioritize to make a decision and then take a singular action, right? Just what's the one thing I'm going to do and then do it and then help others do the same thing as kind of as a repeat change model. And so it took us almost 2 years to kind of build these concepts and roll them out. And we're just now kind of on a second pass on what that looks like and doing it kind of round two inside of the company. And we're still a work in progress. It's not like it's just easy and you start doing this and everybody's suddenly cares like crazy and it's nirvana.
Sure.
There's still human nature still exists. There's still a level of entitlement or selfishness or whatever else that's just normal that you should expect. And but are we better than we've ever been? Yeah. Is there a higher care factor than it's ever existed in our company before? Yeah. Is there still room for improvement? Yep. But it's totally worth it. It's
Yeah.
game changing. So.
When you say you rolled it out, what did that look like? What did you roll out? How did you do it?
Yeah, so we broke these into just little segments. We'd meet for 30 to 45 minutes at a time, where we would invite people to consider different ideas, go through some exercises, and then they would get the chance to do that on their own. They could share in the group if they felt like sharing, but no requirement to share. And then we'd come back the next week and do another little piece. And most of these kind of courses or whatever you want to call them took 3 or 4 weeks of just like 30 minutes at a pop. And then it lands with like picking your one thing, right? The thing that you're going to do, like the real thing you're actually going to do in your life or in your career or in the company. And so that's how we rolled it out in just little group meetings, business, each shop by shop. So we got four different shops and we just did that shop by shop. So it's just kind of small, intimate thing. So.
Curious now, if you were to go back, which it doesn't sound like you would, into the white collar world, into large corporations, and they were considering this model, how would you roll it out in a white collar environment comparatively?
No different at all.
Yeah.
They'll just take longer because it's more likely that they'll actually want to share. And if they're sharing, then the sessions would take longer. But I still am a huge fan of doing it in small increments. I'm not a fan at all of you go to a 3-day workshop and you
have it
just
all
get
figured out.
bombarded with all this information. You
Yeah.
leave kind of feeling like excited and then go back to doing all the things you did before and no change occurs, right?
Yeah.
So
Not
it's
really a practical way to do it.
nah, the traditional corporate models of how we train people, it's financially it makes sense as far as get them all in, get them done, check the box, we finished, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it doesn't actually have a real impact. So you've got to create things that are sustainable, that there's an ongoing check-in associated with it, and you got to recognize most people's attention span and ability to understand and grasp a concept. They're going to get one thing out of a 30-45 minute session, and you go an hour or you go a full day. Like there's no way that you're hitting lots of different topics and they're not retaining it. Like it doesn't work. So why do it that way?
And how do you share the responsibility and accountability as a leadership team? Like, obviously, it can't boil down to one person who cares deeply about this and they're responsible for knowing all the people, knowing all their personal goals and things that they're trying to accomplish. So how do you kind of delegate this amongst a leadership team so that
Yeah.
it's sustainable and then it can kind
Yeah.
of live beyond yourself?
Yeah, we're in the process still of figuring that out, but like we're at the place of like a traditional shop manager is turning more into a coach than a manager. Like this idea that it actually takes time to connect and have these conversations and know where people are at, and that I actually have to really care about these people or they're not going to invest back in me or care back, right? So like helping people who maybe haven't been coaches learn how to be coaches. And I think that the natural evolution of this is that we'll probably end up with potential that these coaching sessions could be by anybody inside of that shop, right? That over time, if somebody's like, I like this idea of coaching, and I'd be open to meeting with others in the shop, whether it's a technician, someone on the counter, a service advisor, like we in a true spirit of 200%, where we're all helping each other. It almost doesn't matter who my meeting's with. That if somebody cares I could meet with them and tell them this is what I'm working on, any ideas, and collectively, there could be coaching received, given or received by lots of different people, and that's like we're getting ready to kind of launch kind of a call it a care factor or 200% training, which is going to be the same thing. Little incremental steps of like, how do I learn how to be a better coach? How do I learn how to do care factor myself and better? And then what does that look like if I'm helping others get better at that? And just letting everybody in the company go through that, not just this idea that that's a manager's job is silly. Like in a true steward environment, and a true accountability environment culture, like everybody's need is learning those principles, and everybody's seeing that I can lead too. It doesn't matter my title. I'm an owner. I'm a steward, so I can lead from from the shoes I'm in, the role I'm in today.
I really love this. There's one particular policy that I've seen you have, and I'm curious how this fits into your 200% accountability model, which is no backbiting or gossip, in your organization. And so things like that, when you apply the 200% model, how does it make kind of creating policy or kind of rules of engagement and how you interact with one another? Like, how do you kind of do that together? How does that kind of go hand in hand?
Yeah, I mean, we've we've kind of looked at like policy creation in general as one of everybody has a role that they're in and is expected to be the go-to guru knowledge person for that. So the thought that the shop floor tech is going to come up with a paternity policy for the company is kind of silly, right? So in the role that you're in, do your job well and present that to the company at large. And anybody has an idea, like bring it up. Like anybody can share an idea and participate in the creation of something. But let's let the people who are in their role propose something. And the more people that it impacts, the more that we would bring that decision to the larger audience and just say, hey, look, this has been designed. It's been well thought through. Feedback time, right? Like, what do you think about this? And if there's anybody that opposes any changes or tweaks that should be made, speak now, forever hold your peace. Because if you don't, like you were given your chance, and it's gonna be enacted, right? So it's still very efficient. It doesn't slow us down. It's not every decision that looks like that, but the more it touches everybody, like we create a little window of time for there to be a reaction to something that we're trying to do, and that helps a lot. So
Yeah, I love that. Well, we really firmly believe, Kevin, that the chair belongs to the business, not the leader. Our goal is just keep it warm for the next person. How must your strategy for safeguarding the organization just continuously evolve in order to truly build resilience within the business?
but it never ends, right? Like it's not I can't. Well, I guess what I love about this model is we've created inside of our purposes that are protected by a trust. This idea that our company is evergreen, that it will never be sold again.
Yeah.
If the shares are not held by individuals, they're held by the trust, and those purposes are what own the trust. It's called a perpetual purpose trust. So this idea that we can't be sold again, the shares are protected forever, and we're all good stewards of that. So it's good for us and it's good for the people after us. It's part of what's literally designed into our structure. It helps a ton because uh, like we're all a part of that, and because of that, our future and our succession is locked in, right? Like we have to keep thinking about how to create that. And trust me, like everybody cares more than they ever did before about decisions that are made and about whether or not this is the right thing or the wrong thing. When things weren't going well with our acquisition, everybody was saying like, is this sustainable? Like, should we keep doing this? Right. Like there was way more care factor about what we did or didn't do with that. And when the decision was made that we couldn't keep doing this anymore, there was still lots of discussion of like, this shouldn't mean that we don't acquire companies or we can't grow anymore, right? And it's like, yeah, because you could get gun shy of like, well, if that didn't go well, like, should we even be doing this, or do we
Tried
just
it
go
before.
in? Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, like there's this feeling that's pervasive that says no, like we're still about growth, because we all still want to grow in our own jobs and our own roles. And so, but let's just do it better. Let's learn from this experience, and the next time let's make sure that it's a better experience, and as we roll forward. So I think just the nature of what we've created is helping to reinforce the importance of stewardship, and how and what that looks like in everything that we do.
I love that. And I imagine that must be liberating for you as a leader to be able to talk about it so openly with all of your owners in the company and for everybody to be bought in. Because I think for a lot of leaders, you have to internalize that and you have to make all those decisions on your own, which isn't really a healthy thing to do, right? If you got yourself in that
Yeah,
position, you're trying to get yourself out. It's good to have a little bit of groupthink going on there.
yeah.
So that's really great. Well, I know we're kind of coming up on time, but we didn't talk a whole lot about a More company. Is there anything you'd want to share with our chief stewards about the intent behind that and what your vision
Yeah.
for the future is?
Yeah, I mean, initially we thought that we set this up as a holding company, and we would diversify, go into various service sectors, and there could be hundreds, if not 1,000 plus companies inside of what we design and build. I think as we've spent a few years trying to understand what we've done, and how we would help others go through this process of transitioning to a steward model. I think it's going to end up looking more like a business cooperative, where individual businesses are owned by various whoever, right? But we all might come together with this idea of business can be done differently in a better way. And if people will commit to some form of transition into employee ownership, and that's the way that they're going to operate their model, it's a better model. And if we come together and do business together, we're stronger together than apart. So let's find reasons to create business cooperatives with the spirit of employee ownership and stewardship being at the core, and that there's a shared services group that's there that helps teach those principles, helps others go through those processes. And then industry by industry, if they're all unique by industry, there might be purchasing power, there might be accounting services, there might be marketing services, HR services, things that as small business owners are hard for us to become great at. But if we pooled our resources together and it was owned by us collectively, and we had kind of common purposes, we could do a lot of great good in the world, and we could help a lot of people run businesses better and create paths for people to have transitions that make sense. But it's not wholly owned by one organization. Like each individual business, they're still unique and separate, so that the unique culture elements and other things are there, and you're not trying to infinitely scale something, because things don't infinitely scale in business. So, and the closer and the more intimate things are at the local level, the more people are feeling empowered at that local level, the better it is. So I think that we're going to be experimenting heavily with trying to think about how do we create one of these inside of the auto space, and then maybe help others create those in other service sectors. So it'd be fun to kick this around with any other steward leaders that are thinking about this or would be intrigued by this, to see like what could happen, what's possible. Could we get some models like this mainstream as opposed to not? Because the world's a better place, work's a better place, like communities are better, families are better when the care factor's been turned on.
Well, count us in as one that would love to help shepherd that forward and see that vision come fully to life. I mean, I really look back to just your early years of caring for the 5 acres and really caring for the land, and the principles that were put into practice from your earliest context of just making sure that things were done and that the cornfields were plowed and weeds were picked. And you really just have a deep sense of care that's inherent in who you are as a human being, as a leader. And I know your organization's tremendously lucky to have you stewarding that. And so thank you for sharing your story, all the principles. I was fascinated by it all, and I'm sure our chief stewards were as well. Thanks for being on the show, Kevin.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun to chat.
Well, my sincere thanks to Kevin for joining us today. Really felt like his journey from the global corporate world back into the local auto blue-collar shop is just a great reminder that the most sophisticated leadership strategies in the world is simply just unleashing the care factor that he talked about. So now here is your steward's call. As always, this is one key practice I think you can take from this conversation and bring it back to the desk today. And for me, it was the 200% accountability principle. This week, I want to look at the team not just as a resource to get the job done, but as individuals who need to own their lives before they can own the company. We can ask ourselves, am I taking 100% responsibility for my own actions, my own self? And am I empowering my team to take 100% responsibility for their own flourishing? Stewardship isn't just about protecting the bottom line. It's about protecting the human being behind the desk or under the car in their case. Remember, a legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's the foundation you build for those who follow. So what you preserve today determines how clearly the next generation can lead tomorrow. And that's what we're deeply passionate about here at the Steward Chair. If you found value in today's conversation, please follow the Steward Chair on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts to share this episode with others. You can also just share from any of those platforms. A final thank you to our incredible team, executive producers Quentin and Thomas, and our managing editor Daniel. They are truly stewards behind this show that I'm deeply appreciative of. And I am your host and researcher, Jeff Bond. And with that, go and be a leader worth following.